So why don't we get going, just because there's a lot of incredibly interesting information that you'll get here and a lot of really wonderful people who are going to provide it in organizations. This is the place where I hope, the real practical on-the-ground learning experiences are conveyed. You heard in the opening sessions that there are challenges to encouraging access, encouraging connectivity. These are the folks who are actually on the front lines of delivering it. And what I've asked each of them to think about in some short prepared remarks is to give some very practical insight and advice based on what they've been doing on the ground. They are engaging with people who aren't really sure what the value is, who aren't really sure who they are and who their organizations are in some cases, and who aren't necessarily convinced that this is a life-changing thing for them. It's interesting, in our data, one of the striking things we find is that everybody who already is in this world has a self-evident feeling that it's worth it. And that certainly would permeated a lot of the conversation that we were having before. But it's not necessarily true that the people who don't have it think that they're missing out or think that there is something self-evidently valuable about it. And so in many ways, the mission of these organizations is to convince them of that, as well as to do the hard work of training and relevance dissemination that needs to be done. So with that introduction, we're gonna march down the line of these folks, and I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. Olga's gonna go first and talk about some of the learnings that they have achieved at the FCC.
Thank you, Lee. I'm Olga Madruga-Forti. I'm Chief of Global Strategies and Negotiation at the FCC. And I'm delighted to be with you this morning. And I was absolutely mesmerized by Lee's presentation earlier today. The FCC, in terms of its basic philosophies and how we go about business, we call ourselves every day a data-driven organization. So to see Lee go through connectivity factors and data, and to highlight for us that one of the growing and persistent areas of connectivity divide is the disabled community. So whereas you'll often see presentations by the FCC and by my colleagues on broadband connectivity overall, both on a domestic and international basis, I'm going to set that aside today and talk about accessibility and connectivity for disabled individuals. So as a first premise, I have a brief PowerPoint presentation, and we won't go through all of it, but this is a complex area of statutory approaches to the problem, as well as regulatory approaches to the problem. So we are happy to answer questions afterwards, but I thought we'd go through some of the principal statutes and some of the principal regulatory actions that the FCC has taken. Firstly, it goes without saying, especially with the Pew research that we saw this morning, that access to telecommunications and the internet permeates every area of our lives. If you think about yourselves just in the last 24 hours, to what degree your day-to-day existence depended on something that you either did at your computer, at work, or on your cell phone and in your private lives. We also see it as going both ways, because not only do disabled persons benefit from the access that they need to be a part of our society, but society benefits from them as well, as in their ability to become productive and to contribute to society. So with that in mind, and Kelly also from the FCC is going to try to keep our dialogue in keeping with what's behind me. FCC is indeed data-driven, and we often advocate competition as a way through some of the telecommunications and broadband challenges of the day. So it might seem unusual to see me today talk about market forces or market intervention in ways that involve subsidies and direct statutory as well as regulatory requirements. And that is because this probably is this subject is the best example of when competition is a factor. It's a benefit factor in the formula for a solution, but it's not the only one, because the market forces are not necessarily there, just through industry and competition. So the disability market is still a relatively small market, albeit growing. And it also can be characterized by lower income, which means less purchasing power, hence smaller market. And the types of advances that need to happen in equipment and adaptive equipment can be expensive. So one theme to keep in mind always with accessibility is also that as technology grows, the gap in accessibility grows. So it seems, and we'll see this momentarily, in the last 20 years of statutes and regulatory actions, almost consistently, it has to do with the technology that is available to bridge the divide between a disabled person and access to the technology is always having to play catch up as technology itself evolves. The speed of evolution of technology is also growing exponentially. So our challenge is for that catch-up action to also grow by exponential bounds. So just a quick historical overview. In the US, statutory and regulatory intervention to make telecommunications and technology available to disabled persons has been around a long time, probably since before most of us had access to the internet. And again, you'll see in the progression of these statutes that each reflects a social need to catch up, for the disabled community to catch up with the technology of the day. So harking back to, say 1982, that puts a smile on my face. I was a young lawyer at the FCC at the time, and we were working on hearing aid compatibility. So do any of us are using hearing aids today? But there was a time, around this time, when the interface between the hearing aid and a telephone would actually cause the hearing aid to send a loud, very loud buzzing noise into the ear of the user. And that was something that had to be dealt with, and actually had to be dealt with by statute. And the FCC implemented regulatory provisions to accompany that. One of the seminal pieces of legislation on connecting the disabled was in 1990. That is the Americans with Disabilities Act. You probably recognize the ADA because it has a variety of titles, and that is the reason why today you can ride your bicycle across blocks using the handicap accessible ramps. Within the ADA, there is a title that has to do with nationwide telecommunications relay services. Think of relay services as just that. Think of a relay race and a handoff between one racer and the other, and a telecommunications relay service works just in that way, with an interface between a person with a disability, either on a mobile phone or on a fixed line phone, wanting to communicate with a hearing person, and there's a relay operator in between. So clearly today we have other technology that can be used, texting, certain apps, etc., but the telecommunications relay service continues to exist. Also, a very important statute then brings us to 1996 and the Telecommunications Act of 1996, which did many things. including increasing cable television regulation. But in the ambit of connecting the disabled, it brings into the concept of television and access to television and video for the disabled. So sort of fast forwarding to 2010 and the more recent past, we have the Communications and Video Accessibility Act. And that act, what it does is, again, trying to bridge the gap between technology and the policy and regulatory provisions that makes technology available to the disabled. And it ensures that people with disabilities are not left behind with the proliferation of the internet and mobile innovations. Rather complex, but basically in 10 sets of regulatory actions, the FCC is about the business of implementing this. And I just very quickly kind of want to do a round robin then of what's happening most recently and how, while technology grows, it is being made available to persons with disabilities. So if we look at Title I, we're talking about such things as SMS messaging, email, instant messaging, and other forms of communications. And the Act tells us that they must be accessible to people with disabilities when achievable. When you try to wrap your mind around, okay, well, what kind of technology or devices are we talking about here? Think about most easily how our senses compensate for each other. For example, if vision is the disability, then our senses compensate to oral. So there has to be an ability for a device that is primarily visual, like a computer screen or a television set, to deliver its capabilities in oral fashion. And if hearing is the problem to be addressed, or the challenge, the disability, then the converse takes place. And you need a visual representation of the material being delivered. So what's new in the CVAA is that technology, or as we design technology, we must identify barriers at the design stage. However, industry, of course, all things cost, and industry can take into account, they can build in the necessary flexibility in their own device, on their own, at the production stage, or you can rely on third-party solutions to bridge the gap between the disabled and the technology. So still in Title I, most importantly, internet browsers must be accessible to persons who are blind or have visual impairment at very little or nominal cost. And this took into effect in 2013. So you might ask, well, how can we ensure that this is happening? This must be very challenging for people that are already challenged in and of themselves. And that is that there are very strenuous accountability and enforcement mechanisms in the statute. Consumers can file complaints. They can and do so. They can file complaints at the FCC. And we're talking about fines up to $100,000 a day for a continuing violation. So that serves certainly as an incentive. Some of you asked me today about, well, what equipment distribution programs exist out there, and there are some, and indeed one such program is called the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program. It has a national budget, it has an annual budget of $10 million, and it is basically a direct subsidy type of program. 911, it suffices to say, harking back to even the early 80s, access to 911 continues to be a problem today. Every time that the problem is solved, it reincarnates in the next technology that comes around. So right now, you have to be able to access 911 by text if you cannot speak, and we continue to try to ensure that that continues to be the case as technology evolves. So probably the primary factor in the CVAA that changes the panorama is the move towards video description for people who are visually impaired. And you may have experienced this watching television, watching cable, and thought, oh, that's interesting. You might hear something like, man is walking in the woods on a snowy evening, something of that nature. And that is so that people who are visually impaired can watch television. And there is actually a statutory requirement that there be 4 hours of prime time such programming for children per week. And currently, the top 60 broadcasters are required to make this available as part of their programming, as well as the top 5 cable channels. So what about equipment? So if the service providers are making the service available, then, and the equipment is the responsibility of the user, to purchase equipment is also required by statute to be compatible with this use. And beginning in December of this very year, the interface for the user has to be capable of being controlled orally in terms of on-off, volume, et cetera, for people who are blind or visually impaired. Closed captioning has been around for a long time, but the idea and the movement forward is to make sure that it is embedded in the programming that people need to see. So right now, FCC rules require that 100% of new programming have closed captioning. So this is different than being visually impaired and being able to enjoy television. This is being hearing impaired and being able to enjoy programming either on television or on the internet. So 100% of new programming has to be capable in that regard. 75% of older programming, this is expensive, isn't it? So there is a provision that takes into account that no provider should be required to spend more than 2% of annual revenue in complying with this provision. So we're here about the internet today. It's IGF USA, right? So such programming, when it's retransmitted on the internet, it is also required to maintain the captioning capabilities. What is not required, and again, how much can you financially require that we keep up with? We are not at the point in terms of statute or regulation that things like user-generated material on YouTube, et cetera, have closed captioning. So we talked about emergency communications to kind of keep it brief. We talked about hearing aid compatibility. Let me just conclude by saying I've put some material on the last sheet of the presentation with some websites. If you want more information, we're happy to share as much with you. And you may want to keep up with the activities of the FCC has a federal advisory committee comprised of members of the disabled communities, universities, other academicians, as well as industry and service providers making recommendations to the FCC that we act upon. And they continue to recommend, most recently, that the two primary areas to keep watching is that technical innovation keep pace with access by the disabled. So thank you. I know this is a very fulsome area, but happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you so much, Lee, for having me here. And it's such an honor to be here amongst all of you to share, again, Microsoft's perspective on connecting the next billion people to the internet, and to be among such a distinguished panel of people who actually work on this every single day to try and close this digital gap. I also have a PowerPoint presentation that Microsoft really like PowerPoint, no bias there. So let's get into it. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to provide a little bit more color on some of the remarks that I made during the lightning talks earlier. And Lee, if you don't mind, you could just let me know when I have 2 more minutes to go, so I don't go over. So I'll provide more color, or at least provide some more flesh to the bones. So as I mentioned earlier, our goal at Microsoft, like everything we do usually starts from a very basic point, which is what is our mission? And our mission is to empower every organization, every individual on the planet to achieve more. We're a productivity company. Everything that we do, you guys, I know some of you might use Office 365, Microsoft Office, Power Dynamics. And so our job is to really make sure that we empower you using many of the tools that we have available. And if you're looking at people across the world, right, globally, about 4.5 billion people do not have access to the internet. In the United States, I mentioned it's about 5 million people. So this is not only a global issue, but it's also a local issue. So don't just think about emerging markets, but also think about developed countries, especially in areas like rural areas, marginalized communities. Think about Native American populations in the United States. Connectivity is a really big problem. And it becomes very difficult for us to be able to support them, to provide them with some of the tools that we have, because most of the things that we do today is really cloud-based, right? We no longer ship you a CD in a box with a code that you're able to access our services. Really, it's through the internet. And so we rely on the internet, and we also rely on a really cool device on the other end. So what we're focused on at Affordable Access Initiatives at Microsoft is really this thing in the middle, this connectivity thing. And so when we talk about connectivity, especially if you're a company that really works on productivity, the main thing that we're talking about is a really good network that really hits on 3 key areas, right? It's ubiquitous, so it's everywhere, anywhere it's needed, right? The second thing that we're really focused on is that it is really robust, so it's able to support applications that are both latency sensitive, and I mentioned something like Skype for Business. You don't want it to like stop every second, right? You want it to keep moving. When you're talking about things like GPS, we want you to be able to move from this place to that place. All these things are really key in commerce. And so that's the sort of internet connectivity that we're really trying to develop here. Lastly, it needs to be affordable. And we figured out a way in which this can happen. And that is as technologies become spread out, like the TV white space technology, which is really helping with this, and I'm going to talk about a little bit. As these technologies really come to the pipeline and really spread out, we expect that as they go up, then the price comes down. And so we're really trying to drive these technologies to achieve this. So that's really what we're looking at. So I mentioned that, I don't think I mentioned this, but I should backtrack and say that I'm actually a legal and policy fellow with the U.S. Government Affairs team here in D.C., but I also work with the Affordable Access Initiative globally. And so the way the Affordable Access Initiatives goes about the business of ensuring connectivity is really through partnerships, right? We are not Comcast. We don't have a cable that's coming to your door in your house, right? We are not Verizon or AT&T, so we don't have these big towers that leads to connectivity. But of course, connectivity is an issue that affects us. And so the way we deal with this thing is like really partnering with internet service providers across the world. Many of these internet service providers are really startups because companies like AT&T and Verizon really cannot meet the economics of connecting people in rural areas. And so we really work with a lot of really innovative ISPs to try and figure out how we're going to be able to drive connectivity. So I just want to show you a few of the projects that we are working on. And so as you can see, we're really all around the world, right? So there's about 18 projects that we're really working on right now. And most of them, one of the first ways that we're able to support these ISPs is through technological input, right? So Microsoft is one of the companies that pioneered TV white space technology, and a lot of these companies really use that. So we really support them in being able to deploy this technology and use it effectively to enhance connectivity. Today I'm going to be really focusing on some of the work that we do in Virginia, just to show you that this is really a local problem too here in developed countries. And I'm really going to talk about that. But before I get into that, let me just tell you a little bit about TV white space and how it works and why we're really excited about this technology. So what's cool about TV white space is that all of you are really familiar with Wi-Fi. The problem with Wi-Fi is that it doesn't really go that far. It can only work within your house. If you go down the street, then you really don't have any connection. But what TV white space does is that we really pull Wi-Fi from the region of radio frequency in which it operates, so which is in like the higher bands, and we pull it down to the UHF and VHF sections that TV usually broadcasts in. So think about it like it's very easy for you to get a TV signal in a rural area, right? And so we're pulling Wi-Fi down, and this Wi-Fi now, you can call it super Wi-Fi, because it goes like a really long distance. So think about one router being here, and you're able to get access however many miles down the street. So, and it costs a lot less than, like, say, this kind of service that a cellular company is providing. It consumes a lot less power. And so it's just a really cool service, really low cost, that works really well, that is able to support most of the productivity tools that Microsoft is really interested in providing. So you can see how many at the bottom. You can see we're affecting about 90 K-12 schools connected, 43,000. You can pretty much see the statistics down there into what kind of impact you're having. So what kind of projects are we looking at? And these are some of the things that we have there. And I'm sure we'll be able to share the slides later if anybody wants them, so you can see this a little bit later. But let me just touch on some of the work that we're doing in Southern Virginia. So we are collaborating with the Mid-Atlantic Broadband Communications, or Broadband Corporation there. And we're delivering Office 365 to about 7,500 primary and secondary school children in 18 schools. And so the goal here is to really close what we term the homework gap, right? And so what this means is you have a lot of kids in places like New York City who are able to do their homework through the internet, so be able to write papers, to be able to do a lot of research, to upload their stuff. But a kid in a rural community who doesn't have access to broadband connectivity, then they're really behind. They don't have this sort of connectivity, right? And so that's really what we're trying to bridge by providing internet access to these folks. I remember Lee mentioned that poverty is also a big issue. When families make less than $30,000, you get about 25% of them are not connected to the internet, so a quarter of them. For families that are making above $75,000, only about 2% of them are not connected to the internet. So you see this big divide, and it plays out in places like rural Southern Virginia. So these are some of, this just tells you about the two counties that we're working in. You can see some of the things about them. The population is really small and it's decreasing, it's going down. You can see that the per capita income is really low. And you can see that a lot of the kids there really participate in the reduced lunch programs. So these are places that don't have that much resources, and we're really working hard to provide internet connection to them. So this is what we were able to deploy. So these are like the TV white space antennas that we're able to put up in this region. So not only are we providing internet connection to just schools, but then kids can actually now go home and be able to access the internet, right? So they have fiber optic infrastructure around. But using TV white space, we're able to pull that infrastructure and be able to beam wirelessly, like really good broadband access to students all over this region. So that's some of the work that we're doing in rural Virginia. Now, what are some of the, 2 minutes? Good. So what are some of the challenges that we face? And you know, this comes to, for example, some of the work that the FCC is working on. And for example, the program, the Lifeline program, which hopefully will be repurposed in the near future to allow people to be able to not only access, you know, phone services, but also be able to access broadband services through that. Because one of the biggest problems that we have, of course, is consumption models, right? So broadband service usually typically costs about $35 to $75 a month. And it becomes really difficult when people are really distressed, they don't have that much income. How are they able to pay for this? So the Lifeline programs of partnerships with the government, like the government really needs to come in and really be able to help people in areas like rural Virginia be able to afford internet connectivity. I mentioned that in our TV white space projects, we usually also work with really small, innovative companies. And for a lot of these companies, access to capital is a really big issue. And so that's something that Affordable Access Initiative really works on, to introduce some of these ISPs to people who are able to fund them. Another thing we work on, maybe not necessarily in rural Virginia, but like power for devices is a really big issue across the world, right? So a lot of us here are connected to the grid. In various different areas around the world, people are not connected to the power grid, and so we help people to figure out how they're able to access power. So these are some of the things that we're really, like, as time goes on, these are some of the 6 key areas, 6 key challenges that we are facing that we're really confronting day by day. I mentioned that we recently accepted 12 entrepreneurs into our Affordable Access Initiative grant program. And so these guys are really being given all the tools necessary to cover all these 6 different elements and to ensure that they're able to provide service across the world. My last comment will be, I think this is a great time because it seems like we are all aligned in the private sector, governments, local populations. We're really aligned in this whole idea of providing broadband access. The UN has a position on this. So I think this is a really great time for us to tackle this problem. And so let's all go out there and make this happen. Thanks.
Good morning. My name is Nona Bolain, and I was invited to be a part of this panel to talk about the access or lack thereof, internet or broadband services on Indian reservations. Particularly, well, I will share some of my personal experiences. I am from the Navajo Nation, and I grew up there. I call the place home, and I still have family members who live there who are not connected. So imagine today that you're here and you're in this very important forum, and we're in a tribal meeting, and suddenly no connection. No, excuse me. Everything just kind of goes out, and you wait, and you wait, and you wait. Then you just carry on. You carry on throughout the day without internet connection. And for us, it's normal. It's a normal thing. And I realized this when, for example, I just came back from a trip from Europe, and I was connected great. Everywhere I went, even the most rural places, I was connected. And I come back to the US, and it's a great connection. And being invited to this forum has allowed me to think that, wow, in my own community, I can't even get connection like this. And I think about all of the times when I had, for example, going into college, had scholarship applications due or had fellowship applications due, something having to do with academia. And there was just nowhere to get internet services. There was maybe the local tribal college library, or because my father was in education, maybe I could go over to his office and try to get online there. And then later, at about 2010 maybe, we got access to residential high-speed internet, which still ran very slowly, and to this day still runs very slowly. And because my family is in a part of the reservation that is populated, meaning it's a kind of a township, so they have a hospital, a tribal college, 3 schools, and a post office, and maybe 2 convenience stores. We are in an area that only one provider is able to provide the service, basically. So the further out you go from this little township, even 10 miles, it becomes even more limited. So you have housing complexes, which are 5 to 10 miles away, which don't have the infrastructure to connect even 20 houses. For example, last night I was on a call with a friend, and she lives probably 15 miles into the reservation, becoming a more desolate area. And she was telling me that it's just becoming more limited, and people are going outside the conventional DSL connection Wi-Fi and looking into satellite services, which become even more expensive. And in these communities, what you have to understand is that we have the highest rate of poverty of any race in this country. So being, number one, an invisible population, the most underserved, and about a third of all people who live on the reservation are below the poverty line. So these people are still making decisions whether to buy food, to pay the water bill, if even they have water. And the last thing on our list of things to do is to purchase internet connection. So that is a big problem in the community. And with educational institutions probably have the most reliable internet service. So you're having the community members going to sit outside the tribal college, and hopefully they have open Wi-Fi so that you don't have to kind of sneak around or ask a student who has, can I borrow your password? And then from that, you don't even have reliable internet service. So I taught in tribal college for about a semester. And there were days where we just went, like 3 days max, I remember, we just went without internet. And it was very frustrating. But the thing is, we also get used to this. Like for me, I'm just used to it. I go home and I expect it to be that way. I come out, I expect it to be that way. It's kind of a norm. And it's actually pretty sad because the only connection a lot of the young children have is at school. So I look at children out here and people and kids traveling, they take everything for granted, getting online, downloading stuff, watching movies. And children on the reservation, they're happy to get even 30 minutes online because it's part of a project. And because, again, my father was in education, so this is something that I had to think about. I was like, because that was normal, for his students to come to our house to ask to use the internet. And as these students progressed in years and they went away to college, they would still come to our house. And they would still say, can we borrow your password, or can we get online at your house? And again, to me, that was just normal. And I think about it, there's such a huge disparity. So the educational institutions they definitely have the most reliable. public internet access. And then you have the US government entities, the Department of Interior, the US Department of Health and Human Services, which provide public services to these tribal communities, and their internet service is impeccable. They are on something totally different from the rest of the community. So, and I know this because, again, my parents were in these industries, and we cannot get on those. Nobody can get on those. It's very, very highly protected. So, that's the type of internet connectivity we deal with. Tribal governments, they sort of are on their own connection. They've yet to figure that out, because I know there are different companies, broadband companies, that reach out to tribal governments, that kind of the tribal offices will sample what they have to offer, but they won't offer it to the rest of the community. So they have very great connection in some of these areas. And a lot of times, the tribal governments are the ones who can help these tribal communities the most. They have the access, they know about grants, and they know about collaborations with various companies, but there's so much tribal bureaucracy, and there's so much red tape in trying to get to do business with a lot of these tribal governments, that it takes years. It takes a long time, and we just hope that we move faster than we're moving now, and hopefully the tribes can realize, that the tribal leaders can realize, that you're putting your people so far behind the rest of the world. You're really, I mean, it's just setting the Native American populations back. So I think that there's no one solution, because many tribal governments are different, and ideally to streamline action plan to put all of this on, put us all on one page. That would be ideal. So that's what we deal with in Native American communities.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jeff Blum. I'm the Deputy General Counsel of Dish Network, a satellite TV and broadband company. And Ms. Lane, I agree with everything that you said. It is really disappointing that in the United States there are tribal communities in about 10 million homes in the hardest to reach areas of the U.S. that don't have access to real broadband. And all the things that you described, it's such a shame. You are being left behind. And I'm here to talk about how satellite broadband can help fill that gap. Dish has been in business for over 30 years, and we focused on rural communities providing television service, which we do everywhere in the United States at an affordable price. Broadband is more difficult. And there's two major obstacles to get good broadband to rural communities. First is the cost of doing so. You need to incentivize the companies who have the technology and the infrastructure to build out to those communities. I have Comcast. My home in Arlington is 150 megabytes. It's a fantastic service, but the cost of laying fiber to tribal communities and farms in Nebraska or communities in Montana that live surrounded by mountains, it's very expensive. It's cost prohibitive. The second obstacle is, even if companies build out to these rural communities, can people actually afford it? Dish, about 5 years ago, purchased a company called Hughes Satellite Systems that had launched satellite broadband satellite. And they launched another satellite a few years later. Today, Dish Network and our sister company EchoStar and Hughes offer a satellite broadband product to almost every area of the United States, providing about 10 megs down and 1 meg up. That is real internet access. You can send emails, you can go to the web, you could do education, you can do VoIP. Satellites have a limitation in that a satellite could only handle so many people using broadband. There's a capacity. We have 2 satellites that are in space right now, and we plan to launch the next generation satellite called Jupiter 2 in the next few months. And with that satellite being launched, we are going to be able to provide, on a technological basis, broadband to everywhere in the United States, including every tribal community in the United States. But as Ms. Lane noted, broadband service is relatively expensive, especially for communities that are living below the poverty line or don't have the resources in order to do that. So we know that satellite broadband is a cost-effective way to provide service to rural communities in the United States. The problem is cost. A few years ago, the Commerce Department launched a pilot program where they were giving various broadband providers grants. And Dish and EchoStar and Hughes were awarded a grant. And with this subsidy, over 100,000 people signed up for satellite broadband because the subsidy that the government provided allowed people to actually afford it. That is a great success story where the technology was there, the government in partnership with industry provided money to make broadband affordable, and 100,000 people who did not have internet were able to get internet access. The problem of rural broadband has recently been recognized. On Monday, a very important letter was sent by 24 senators, bipartisan, Democrats, Republicans, to the FCC, recognizing that rural communities do not have what they need to have in order to be on a level playing field with suburban and urban communities. And for 24 senators, mostly in rural states, telling the FCC, telling the public that this is a major problem, I think is significant. The FCC has done a lot for rural communities. Most notably, several years ago, they reformed the Universal Service Fund that was subsidizing telephone service to rural communities, and they transferred the fund to provide broadband. And that is an ongoing process. And Dish and EchoStar have been involved in this. And one of our major concerns is you want to provide broadband, whatever it is, whether it's white spaces, satellite, microwave, cable, fiber, to communities at the lowest cost. Whatever technology is able to get good broadband to folks at the lowest price should be awarded the USF funds. And unfortunately, some of the policy decisions have favored certain technologies, favored phone companies who were getting sort of an edge where, if they did it, they would get first dibs at the subsidy. We think that's wrong. We think that the policy to provide subsidies, which, as I just explained, are critical to actually allowing people to afford broadband, should be technology neutral. If satellite could go to a tribal community and provide broadband cheaper than fiber or white spaces or microwave, satellite should get the subsidy. If a community, if a rural telephone company could provide broadband cheaper for that community over satellite, they should win. But we shouldn't have the government deciding what technologies it wants to favor. It should be about getting broadband the cheapest, most effective, cost-effective way to communities, and then providing that critical subsidy so folks could actually get broadband. So we know the technology is there. Satellite broadband should be part of the solution, and hopefully in partnership with the government, the FCC, the Department of Commerce, we can work on policies that actually fill this divide and provide broadband to folks who are in desperate need of it. I mean, we're 2016 and kids can't get access to the internet to do their homework. My daughter, she has an iPad that her school has given her to do all of her homework, to study for her test, and the fact that communities and millions of people in the United States don't have access to that same technology is a shame. And as different countries and communities and governments and policymakers look at everything, my 35,000-foot pitch is consider all technologies. Treat all technologies equally and try to find the best, most cost-effective way to help fill this divide. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, for inviting me, and it's a real honor to be on the stage with everyone here. So I'm with Comcast Corporation, and I'm the Executive Director for Public Policy at Comcast, so I focus on mostly on industry structure, competitive issues, and I wanted to sort of lay out what I'm going to speak about. First of all, I'm going to sort of speak about the problem that we're trying to fix, which is the broadband adoption problem, and what our effort or what our solution, this is just one of the solutions out there, is. I just wanted to quickly go through what it is, who's eligible, and so on, and then discuss what our vision was and how we designed the program, and then talk about how the program has changed, how it has adjusted based on the research and based on our experience running it, and then sort of finally conclude on sort of where we're heading. So the problem is, I think in the US, in sort of broadband access, there are two big problems. The first one we just heard, which is low access to high-speed networks deployment in rural areas. Because if you look at the deployment issue in urban areas, the FCC subscription data, which all of the ISPs have to file, the most recent data is from December 2014, 96% of urban areas, that's cities and suburbs and exurbs, have access to fixed broadband provider offering 25 megabits a second down and 3 up. This is from the FCC's broadband progress report, which was released about a year ago, December 2014. And across the country, as an average, 90% of households, have access to a fixed provider providing 25.3. And that has increased. In December 2013, the previous report, the FCC found that across the country, 80% had access to 25.3. This is the 25.3 is the standard that the benchmark that the FCC has been using. So in one calendar year, deployment increased by 10 percentage points. That did not happen in rural areas. In rural areas, I think there's an access gap of about 35%. So that's one of the problems. The second problem is the adoption problem. And we're predominantly an urban company. Our network, the footprint is predominantly, in fact, exclusively in urban, suburban areas. The adoption number according to the Census Bureau in 2014 was 75.1%. So, across the country, 90% of households have access to 25 megabits down, 3 up. 96% of households have access to fixed networks at that speed across the country in terms of deployment, and yet only 75.1% have actually subscribed to a plan. And if you look at the census data, this is from the from the CPS data, which is a massive sample size, the subscription rate has been increasing even while, as you know, median incomes in this country have collapsed and haven't really recovered since about 2012. They're sort of at the bottom. Labor force participation rates are at an all-time record back to 1973 levels. So, very tough economic times in terms of what the incomes that people get to purchase these things. But adoption rate has been slightly increasing, but there is a big gap, deployment and adoption. So what we try to, so that's the problem that we're trying to fix, because we think that where those networks are, then there should be much higher adoption rates. So what was our solution? So I wanted to sort of quickly describe what the solution is and who's eligible. So this is available across the Comcast footprint, where we have a fixed network. It's called the Internet Essentials. That's the name of the program. It's available across our footprint. And here's what it provides. It is designed, and I will go into design later on. It's designed based on research. We wanted to address the 3 main drivers of adoption. Number 1, relevance. number 2, cost, and number 3, access to a computer. So we wanted to make sure that a solution that we designed addressed each of the drivers, because addressing one without the other is not going to solve the problem. We wanted to address all 3 of them. So we provide a high-speed connection, 10 megabits per second down, and a Wi-Fi router included for $9.95 per month. So that addresses the cost issue. The second one is we're not a computer, we don't sell computers and laptops, but we have created an arrangement for this. So we provide a low-cost computer with, I'm sure Microsoft's going to happy to hear this, Microsoft Office Suite and Norton Suite included at a subsidized cost of $150. So that's a desktop or a laptop, depending on your choice. And then finally, so that deals with the access to a computer. And then finally, the most important, which is the relevance point, we have a full suite of digital literacy, online training across a full range of topics in both English and Spanish, available in print, online, and in person to anyone who's on the program or to anyone who's not on the program. So those are the elements of the program. And who's eligible? We designed this specifically in mid-2011, I'll go into it in more detail, to address adoption through education. So this is available to any family in our footprint who has at least one child eligible for the free or reduced lunch national school lunch program. So any family that has at least one child can sign up. And then whether you go to regular school, parochial school, or we've expanded eligibility. And then in terms of if your child happens to go to a school, we have an auto-enrollment program to make it easier for people to sign on. So if your child goes to a school where at least 40% of the students are eligible for the National School Lunch Program according to the government, then anyone in that school is eligible. So you don't have to prove that you're on the school lunch program. And roughly, our estimates, about half of the schools in our footprint come under that. So any kid who goes to that school, any family goes to that school can get it. They don't have to provide any evidence that they're actually getting the school lunch program. And then people can apply for it online. We have streamlined, we have made it efficient, numerous times changed the application process, so you can pretty much apply for it online, and all we need is some kind of official document that says that you're getting the school lunch program if you are not in a school where 40% is. Otherwise, you get it automatically. So that's the program, that's eligibility, and let me sort of give you some numbers on what we've done. This has been up and running since mid-2011, and as of February 2016, which is when the last results were announced, in that period, we have connected just over 600,000 families, about 2.4 million people in the country, low-income communities. And we track this. This is run as just another part of the Comcast product line, which means that all the rigorous metrics, all the rigorous results and the metrics that folks have to get in terms of getting people to subscribe apply to this product as much as the other products. And we have found that as we have learned, the rate of increase of subscription have increased. In fact, 2015 was the best year for us. We had a year-over-year growth of roughly 30%. So our growth in February to February 2015 to 16 was 30% over the previous year. So, and we've seen that trend. The rate of increase has grown. And in terms of digital literacy, which is the other metric, we have, since 2011, we've tracked this. We've had roughly about 4.4 million people have obtained our training through online, print, or organizations that we partner with. And we've spent roughly about $280 million in cash and in kind in providing that training. And then we deliver, and I'll go into this in more detail in how we execute this. We deliver this through our grassroots and community-based organizations. We have over 9,000 partnerships that we use, because we realize that at the end of the day, we can come up with these designs, but at the end of the day, the delivery, given that this is a difficult community, given the point that I made earlier that relevance is a hugely important issue, we need to rely on those trusted voices to do that. And we have 9,000 partners, and we provide material about the program in 14 languages. And then we design the material also to fit with the particular needs and to kind of have the hook with the particular community. So that's the program. And how to sort of quickly go through, how do we design this? This is from the beginning, this has been a research-driven program. So there are 3 elements to this. This is research-driven in its design. It's based on community activism, grassroots organizations. That's the second leg of the stool. And then the third leg is the long-term commitment. So in terms of design, when this was first designed, we actually used Lee's colleague, John Horrigan, who was the head of research at the National Broadband Plan, and Blair, who ran the broadband plan, is in the audience. So we used the research from the plan to figure out what are the drivers of adoption. And the plan found that there was relevance, cost, and access to a computer. Those are the three major drivers. So we wanted to design a program that addressed all three of those issues. And we have tracked the design. We've used census data and Pew data. We've tracked it, and those drivers still are true. And along the way, we've also done extensive research. Again, before John Horrigan, who now works at Pew, before he joined Pew, he did the first longitudinal study that I think that's ever been done in broadband adoption, where we looked at some of our adoption customers before they joined the program to after they joined the program, and we looked at how they evolved into being engaged digital citizens. So we are continually using research to adjust the program. And as a private enterprise, as a private company, we have the flexibility to do that. We can pretty quickly change things. And then community organizations I mentioned, that is the core. If there's one thing that drives, there are two things that drive this. One is the need to address all three of them. You often hear in certain circles that, if you have a turnkey solution, especially out here in DC, everything will be solved. And our experience speaking with people who do this day in and day out on the ground is that it requires a holistic solution, and training literacy is a major part of it. So that's why I said there's over 9,000 partners. They're the folks that we deliver this through. And then finally, the long-term commitment. This program was a voluntary obligation that our company took on when we acquired NBC Universal back in 2011. It was for a 3-year period, and it ran out in 2014. And we announced in 2014 that this is now indefinitely extended. This is part of the company's DNA, and this will always be around. So it was initially for 3 years, and we've extended it. And along the way, we've extended eligibility, which I'll go into. So that's the vision behind it. We wanted to identify the problem, figure out what's driving it, and design a solution that addressed all of those. And then wanted to make sure that this wasn't just another press release type thing, where we kind of make a press release, make a great statement, talk about the people who are being left behind, and then sort of move on. We wanted to make sure that we learned as we changed, as we learned, and we have a commitment to this long term. And then finally, sort of looking at how we have sort of a practical thing, how have we sort of adjusted the program? We have, before we, in everything that we do, like I said, we use research and we look at experiences and we learn from our own experience, but also from the people, more importantly, from the people who drive this. So we currently have 3 pilot programs to look at how we can extend this to other communities. One is senior citizens. We have them, I think, in Illinois and a couple of other states. Then we've extended it to community colleges. We have a pilot program in Colorado and Illinois to see, because those communities have different ways of getting to them, to get people to sign up. So we're looking at the data, we're looking at the results and see how this could be done. Because we just, like I said before, we don't want to sort of make a big announcement, make a big press release and sort of go on. We wanted to see how it can be executed. And then public housing. We announced recently again, a trial to be part of Connect Home, so that if you're living in a public housing, then you can automatically get access to all 3 elements of Internet Essentials without having to go through the school lunch program piece. That's a trial. And my colleague, Karima Zidan, who's supposed to be, she runs the program, is supposed to be here. We're making some announcements later today about the program, so that's why she couldn't be here. So, we're taking a methodical approach to how we extend this and want to make sure that we actually get results rather than sort of, make statements. And finally, looking at sort of the enhancements that we've done, the most important enhancements, in addition to expanding eligibility, is that we've changed roughly about more than half of the enhancements we've done have been to make it easier for people to sign on. And to give you a good example, when we first started, we would make announcements in community centers and say, hey, come and sign up for this program. You can get low-cost access. Oh, by the way, you can also get training. And then we weren't really getting much traction. And then we thought, okay, maybe we should flip it around. So we got our community partner to say, hey, there's digital literacy training about how to use Microsoft Word to write an application, and how to apply for a job online, how to do your banking online. And then that would be to get people to come in. And then we would say, as they're in class, we would say, oh, by the way, if you have any interest, here's something you can sign up to. Our sign-ups actually increased significantly. So that's something that we learned from our partners and that we executed very quickly. And then we did the online applications. And also we've extended, make it easier for people to sign up by, accepting not just any government-issued document about school lunch program, but anything basically that says that, that we can tick the box and say that, okay, you're on the school lunch program. The automatic enrollment was one of those so that, people didn't have to come up with paperwork. If you're in a school that has 40%, then you're automatically signed up whether you're on the school lunch program or not. So, so that's in essence what we've tried to do. And so, in conclusion, we think that, our rate of increase in subscriptions has increased, but we have a long way to go. We recognize that this is a very difficult community to cut through to. Before I came to Comcast, I worked at the National Urban League, which is a direct service provider. It's the largest African-American direct service provider. And one of the things I learned is that I had never worked in a sort of a direct community service provider. I had spent 8 years working in data analytics, and I was a corporate transactions attorney. I was doing mergers and acquisitions type work. But one of the things I learned, a great deal I learned at the Urban League, is that you cannot have, there are no turnkey solutions when it comes to communities that are sort of have many, many structural and socioeconomic issues. You have to have wraparound solutions. You have to work with community organizations like my old friends at the Urban League. And you have to be committed. You have to, not only committed, you have to be committed to making adjustments as you learn from them. So that's what we're trying to do. So my request to you is that, if there are any of you, unfortunately, our network is only in the US, although NBC Universal is across the world. This is only available in the US within our footprint. But if there are any community organizations, community partners here who would like to partner with us, please come and see me, and I can connect you to Karima, who runs the program.
Let's just go straight to audience questions. Yeah. Yeah.
My name is Mariana, and
Is there a microphone? Let's repeat the question for the moment. Go for it.
my name is Mariana, and I'm currently an intern at Harvard's Berkman Center for Internet and Society. I commend you all for the work that you're doing, especially since it's so far-reaching based on what you're saying. Let's start again.
No, just keep going.
We do start again. Okay, so I'm just coming out of an investigative journalism fellowship where we were kind of immersed in this doctrine of follow the money, and I'm wondering how much does profit and revenue play into your decisions in these programs, and how that can affect the outcome for better or worse.
Do you want me to go? So I'm not sure what the profitability on these programs is, but and we're a private company, and in a sort of a market economy that people have disagreements about profitability and free markets are good or not. That's sort of a personal opinion, but for us, the design, as I said before, we wanted to identify the three big things that drive adoption: and cost, relevance, and access to computers. We don't provide computers, for example. That's not our business, but we included that through a partnership with a third party because we found out through research that that's a big point. So, whatever the point might be, to the extent to which profitability drives these programs that these different companies have, Dish has a program, Microsoft has a program, we have a program, AT&T now has a program, Charter will soon have a program. I don't know, but to me, the question is, they take different designs, they address different problems. The Dish program addresses a problem that Jeff just mentioned. So whatever the driver of profitability might be, that's an interesting sort of a discussion point. As long as they are designed to address different issues and they are rigorously analyzed and flexible, I think, and then you look at the results, then I think, from my perspective, that's all that matters.
And from Dish's perspective, satellite costs about $300 to $500 million. And today, there's about 1.5 million satellite broadband subscribers in the United States. We're a public company, private company, we have to return a profit. But that's why there's such opportunities. The USF fund has billions of dollars that could help subsidize so folks could actually afford broadband. And that's where you incentivize companies to build more satellites or to put up more white space antennas or to expand Internet Essentials, that if you have a partnership where companies spend billions of dollars investing in broadband technologies, that's a positive thing. And then if the government could work with industry, because the goals are the same. I mean, I think everyone wants connectivity. If the government has this pool of funds that is wisely administered, fairly administered on a technology neutral basis, I think you could see a lot of significant progress.
Yeah, and if I could just add one thing, for a company like Microsoft, I keep saying this, it's really a part of our mission. There's just no way around it, right? If our goal is to empower every person and organization on the planet to do more and they don't have an internet connection, then we really cannot achieve our mission. So is this a charity thing for us? Absolutely not. You know, it's part of our business plan, right? So if we can't give you services, then, you know, it's an existential problem for us. And so that's why we really work on this. But the cool thing about it is that also we can be able to, you know, tailor our business plan to meet like really public interest. So so we're able to, our business interest is also driven by public interest. And like this merging like really creates this great environment for us to work in. And so we're able to work with governments around the world, in the US and all these different places, to help them to be able to drive internet connectivity. So not only is it good for their communities, but it's also good for us as a business. So I don't think it necessarily has to be one or the other, but I think for us, we're in a very fortunate position that it actually makes a lot of sense for us.
James?
Thank you, Lee, and thank you to all the panelists. My name is Jim Galvin with Phileas. Since we're talking about technology solutions, I wanted to ask about the future of those solutions and their long-term maintenance and existence. Now, Midori, you partly answered my question because you talked about Comcast's long-term commitment to the project that it's doing. And I'm hopeful that, Olga, since, disability policies have been around for such a long time, you're supposed to deploy, technologies. And as we've all recognized along the way here, the internet and internet technologies evolve at such a fast pace. And we're all thinking about the present. We're all looking at the best solution for the here and now that I can achieve in order to increase access, and then another level of access, affordable access, and access for people with special needs and disabilities. But what about issues of obsolescence or technologies that become orphaned? I mean, what happens down the road? What's next after your project has come and gone, and you've got these things deployed out there? What happens to these people down the road? And what happens when the technologies have evolved and they've changed, and now what they have no longer works? Or, in fact, is just not doesn't work with current technologies, or is left behind because the companies have come and gone. I mean, up here we have very large companies between Microsoft, Dish, and Comcast. Well, we'd probably like to think that they're not really going to go anywhere in the long term. But you are dependent on other technology providers for some of the projects that you're pushing forward. What happens when they change and you can no longer use what you've been using all along?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Actually. Okay. No, that's a very good question, and hopefully in a perfect world, what happens when obsolescence to technology occurs in the ambit of accessibility? You congratulate yourself for a step forward, because hopefully something happened that caused that obsolescence, that filled a gap. For example, in the case of accessibility for the disabled, for many in the disabled community, the need for the telecommunications relay service is lessened by the fact of greater access to texting and other apps on their smartphones to communicate with the hearing and speaking community. So hopefully that step forward leaves behind technologies but brings new solutions.
If I could, so I mean, I think, technology is actually, I mean, the improvements are actually making it's helping us. I mean, let me just give you on the disability point, our NBC Universal side of our company. Just recently we had The Wiz, which is an old 1970s African-American production. We relaunched it on NBC, and it had video descriptions for the blind. This is not something required by regulations or by the government. So that was a new innovation that the company took, and technology enabled that. And the other one, this is a shameless plug for Xfinity, but the voice remote, which if you have X1 platform and in Comcast territory, and if you're a Comcast customer, you can actually speak to it and get the video to come up. Again, that's not anything that's required by regulations, but that was enhanced by the movement of software to the cloud, the investments and the innovations that our company has made in the X1 platform. So those, and that was designed, and I was speaking to an engineer who actually was involved in X1. He was saying that, one of the things that we try to do with our accessibility services is not to sort of have them as a silo over here that we design things for accessibility, but they become useful for everyone. So the voice remote is great for someone who's blind, but it's also great for someone who doesn't want to use the keypad. So those are the things that technology allows us to do. And as long as we keep investment growing, and as long as we keep innovation growing, as long as we allow for trials and all sorts of ideas to bloom without unnecessary sort of approval processes, then I think those things will continue.
And I'm actually optimistic. I think technology is going to help the situation. And I'm sure most of you have probably heard of 5G, that there's an enormous amount of effort on 5G. The FCC this morning, I assume they voted the Spectrum Frontiers item that's unleashing a tremendous amount of spectrum for 5G. And 5G is going to allow much faster speeds, much lower latency, allowing billions and billions of devices, Internet of Things. And as technology gives companies the ability to do more with their money, I actually think that helps the situation, that we're going to be able to provide really fast modems, be able to have cars communicate, and all the devices in your house integrated. I think that's a positive thing that will hopefully allow more folks to get access to these technologies.
Two really fast questions. 1, 2, and then we've got to end it. End really fast.
I'll be really fast.
Okay.
My name is Haewon. I'm with ICT unit of the World Bank for this summer. I have a question for Mr. Amendi. The internet connectivity, the broadband connectivity is the first step to digitalization for a lot of countries. And one of the things I'm working with a team is to try to identify the cybersecurity challenges and how the developing countries have to deal, and how, what kind of role the bank should play. And as a first step to the very digitalization of these countries, how do you embed the security aspect? You mentioned about the interoperability.
Okay, why don't we just stop it there and let him answer? Okay, 2 at the same time.
I wanted to know whether or not you only look at direct impact, i.e. the number of homes that are connected or number of individuals or clients, or do you also, as in the case of Comcast, if you have community centers, do you see indirect outreach of your initiatives that are connecting these unconnected communities?
Great. Thanks. Got it.
Okay, I'll tackle the cybersecurity question. So of course, at Microsoft, cybersecurity is a really important thing, and it continues to be increasingly important as time goes by. when we're delivering our services, when you're talking about internet connectivity in rural areas, places that don't have access, we really have to figure out like what kind of applications can really be used by these people in this various places. A lot of the time, like cybersecurity might not, for a small business or like a kid who's just trying to get on the internet, like cybersecurity might not be top on their list. But as that issue continues to increasingly become a problem for them, we actually have solutions for that sort of thing. So we work with governments around the world in cybersecurity programs, for sure. But when it comes to like just delivering connectivity to like a rural area, even though that might not be the top of their minds for like a lot of the people, we do have solutions for those. And as time goes by, as those ISPs that we're working on continue to raise that issue as a problem, we actually have solutions for that sort of thing.
Who wants to do the impact metrics?
Yeah, so I can only speak for Comcast. So as of February 2016, the 600,000 families, or 2.4 million, that's a direct impact. Because we wanted to, as I said before, we are very, very research-based and designed and rigorous. So we wanted to get to the sort of a conservative estimate, because you often see, you can use a multiplier and say that, 10 times people got impacted. We wanted to look at the minimum number. So we're only looking, that 600,000 households that have actually signed up. We have not multiplied it by a multiplier to get to how many neighbors might have come in and used it and so on. And we have found that roughly those households have about 4 people on average in those households we've looked at. That's where the 2.4 million comes from. So the 600,000 and the households and 2.4 million people that we have connected, actual subscriptions, that's the bare minimum, because the people who are affected, the neighbors and friends and so on, would be far greater, but we don't have an estimate, and we are comfortable with the bare minimum.
Jeff? No. Okay. Well, amazing group. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank them.